West African foreign ministers today held emergency talks on the political crisis in Senegal, as well as the withdrawal by 3 member countries from the regional bloc. The Economic Community of West African States Extraordinary Session addressed President Macky Sall's decision to delay elections in Senegal just a week after Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger declared their departure. ECOWAS Commission President Omar Aliou Touré said it was the time we have been most challenged, calling the crisis in Senegal a worrying development. African Affairs Analyst Dr. Victor Okhai joins us now to x-ray the political import of this development. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.
Thank you for having me.
Well, what would you say is happening in Senegal? You know, the president has already said that he's not running for a 3rd term. And of course, we know that Senegal has been seen as a bastion of democracy in West Africa. It's been relatively stable. So what would you say is causing what we're seeing presently in that country?
Funny as it may sound, I'm not surprised. You recall that Macky Sall was one of those at the vanguard or at the head of those of the West African leaders who were anti-coup, in a manner of speaking. On the surface, it may appear that they truly care about democracy. But in reality, I think what they care more about is self-preservation. And it is unfolding. Because it's like, okay, putting together, if you like, laws or agreements or regulations to dissuade coup. And nobody is talking about good governance, you know, which should really be the primary thing. If you don't want coups, then make the people happy. And yes, his regime is drawing to an end or has drawn to an end now, but the people have not been happy. Senegal has been descending, you know. There was a riot May 2019, I think, also, or was it 2020? Another in 2022, June 2022. And the people, things have gotten increasingly bad in that country, in spite of the fact that there are prospects for oil and of growth in the economy. So traditionally, the Senegalese have been known, they're the only one, as we all know, that have not, had any military push or coup since independence. In the same year we got our independence, which is 1960. So, but what has happened now is Macky Sall always knew he would want to stay longer, in spite of what he says. It's not about what he says, it's really about what, he means. And, yes, he said to people he's not going to do any tenure allocation, he's not going to have a 3rd term. Of course, the Constitution does not allow that, so there's very little he can do about that. But it does not mean he cannot manipulate. And the process of manipulation is what has started. Typically, what our leaders would do here, and that's what you're saying, you just look for an excuse to extend your stay and all that. And that's exactly what has happened. He has an excuse now to extend, the tenure. And that's what's going on.
And it's being called a needless constitutional and political crisis. What do you make of the calls from a lot of individuals, including our very own Femi Falana, saying that the ECOWAS leadership needs to sanction Senegal and its leaders in order to show some show of strength, especially in the light of the fact that we have 2 members of ECOWAS who are storming out, 3 quite angrily. So what do you make of those calls within this particular context?
This is the true test, but I'm afraid that it might fail as well, and I'll tell you why. Why is it a test? Macky Sall is one of them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And now they're going to sit down and decide the fate of one of their friends or one of them. Mm-hmm. And in reality, a coup can either be military or bloodless. Democratic. No, I'm not even talking about that bloodless now, but it can be military or it can be against the people. It can be a civilian coup, as this is almost turning out to be, because this is going to be like a rip on democracy. So ECOWAS would make a show of saying hand over immediately. But if they're truly sincere, then we need the Gambian treatment. Mm-hmm. If they truly want to show sincerity. But you see, the problem I see with ECOWAS is a commitment of its leaders to powers outside of ECOWAS. Their commitment is not to the people. Most of the time, the decisions they take are, for their own, if you like, existential, selfish interest. They want to see how they can continue to perpetuate themselves, and they're beholden to powers other than the power that actually got them there originally. And that's why we have this problem. And so, because of that, there's no true unity. What would have united them all is the people. But what is separating them are those various interests. We have gotten back to a multipolar system right now, where, different countries are pulling the strings, across, let me not say Africa, West Africa in particular, and so what you see is what we're experiencing now. Some are answerable to the Russians, some are answerable to the French, still answerable to the French, some to the US, and so you have diverse interests. So what you see here is a clash of interests, and that's what we're suffering.
But I'm wondering, can ECOWAS actually afford to wield the big stick at this point, especially when you consider Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso withdrawing? They're not even willing to wait for a year. They want to withdraw immediately. Has ECOWAS's position been weakened?
I want to say that I am embarrassed that this is happening when my president is in charge. True leadership would bring together, not superintend over a disintegration. And that's what's happening right now, unfortunately. And the reason for that is simple. Like I said, our interests are outside, not within. What we would normally do traditionally as Africans is, and as you know, they say your child is bad or has done this and all that. You say, okay, fine. You dismiss the people first and come in-house and sort yourselves out. There will be accusers, there will be all that. That's what we do as Africans. We will do the beating within, take care of our problems internally. But in this particular case, we're ready to throw some of us under the bus. ECOWAS used to be respected. There was ECOMOG, across the continent. It was stronger than the AU, which has since lost respect a very long time ago. So ECOWAS was a model regional bloc. It was a model globally. In the things, in our interventions across all facets, if you like. But what has happened since is a situation now where there's a crisis of confidence, not only in the leadership, but also in the body as a whole, because there's a lack of sincerity. There are inconsistencies in policies and in the way these policies are implemented. When you introduce double standards, that's what happens. The Nigerians, fine, we talk about military. And let me say something that is really interesting here. There is a trend that is taking place right now. 1960 and the early 60s and late 50s, we had this independence from the colonialists, okay? And then the civilians took over. And when the civilians took over, they started out well, and they wanted to continue to perpetuate themselves, and then they started abusing power. And so the people started crying out, and they wouldn't listen. And so the military came and took over. Now, a new cry came for civilians to take over again, that that the military are not the right. So we got the military out, the civilians have taken over, and another round of abuse again. And the people are crying out. You understand? So, and this time around, the colonialists are still involved because there's a neo-colonialism, not the way it was before, but in a different form now through economy and other forms of, manipulations and control. And the people want their power back again. So it's like a vicious circle all over again.
A vicious cycle, and ECOWAS really and truly has been rubbished. It's quite sad to see. But you were talking about this new neo-colonialism we're dealing with and how separate interests are really the cause of what we're seeing now. Is democracy really an applicable form of leadership, governance that makes sense within West Africa? And I'm asking because it seems like it's failing quite drastically. And this year, or the end of last year to this year, has really just shown the level of African leaders and the way that they reason through these issues. So, should we be thinking of something other than democracy? Is it even possible at this stage?
Good question. Is it really possible? I think the more important question is, will the politicians even allow it? It suits them right now. It suits them the way it is. What we have is not native to us. It was imposed on us, not just imposed on us, by the very nature of our makeup, the way we were divided, there's no homogeneity. If you look at our traditional systems, we don't have such, well, it's not 100% proof and all that, but traditionally, we have ruled ourselves with very minimal problems. Why do I say so? Before the white man came, other than the wars for territorial expansion, we had, if you like, whether emperors or kings or obas and all that. And the succession was clear. I'm not saying necessarily that we can go back to that, but we had our own traditional systems. If you go to places like Igbo land, for instance, where they didn't really have originally like kings in the traditional sense, they had their way of having, they had elders that ruled them. So different people have different ways and all that. If we had been allowed to continue and to fashion out something that would work for us, we wouldn't have the problems that we're having right now. If you notice, the way the North is ruled is different from the way, before the colonialists came, it's different from the way the Southwest is ruled, it's different from the way the Southeast is ruled, or the Benin Kingdom, okay? So, but when you bring everything in one mishmash, if you like, and then put everybody together and impose a system that is not workable for us, then that's what you get. So can we change it? I don't know. But if there's sincerity, and we can all agree, like people have always advocated for us to sit down and fashion out a constitution that works for us, then perhaps we might begin to see. And then those who are advocating for swearing by Shango, maybe it might begin to work for them. But we may not go to that extreme, but we would then see how we can fashion into the system something that we know that works, checks and balances that truly will check and create a balance.
Okay, so I'd like to take us back, to Senegal. I'm wondering if the judiciary in that country can step in at this point, to help resolve this crisis. Of course, we know that neither the president nor the National Assembly has the power to annul or change the date of elections. And of course, we've heard some civil society organizations threaten to go to court. So do you think that the court can be trusted to uphold the Constitution at this point?
I don't claim to know too much about the judiciary in Senegal, but across every jurisdiction, you have people with integrity and some who are heavily compromised. Now, what I fear, judging by what has happened with the legislature, what I fear is Macky Sall is deploying all the resources at his disposal to have his way. Because in reality, the legislature is not necessarily, he doesn't really have the majority support as such, but he was able to have his way. You get what I'm saying? So I'm afraid that the judiciary might not act too differently, because these people usually have a long-term view of these things. They know what they want to do, and they plan people or find a way, one way or another, to force the kind of results that they want. But I would say to the Senegalese, test the system. I recall something that they were saying, particularly civil societies, they were telling the ordinary Senegalese, don't go out there, don't protest, because they will come after you. All the typical, the classical signs of dictatorship that you would see, it's like calling a dog a bad name, having a reason to postpone and all that. We saw them clamp down, on social media, clamp down on protesters, and all of those classical signs, they have all played out within this short period. So I can tell you that Macky Sall does have a game plan, and the Senegalese would have to decide whether they want to play along with him or they want to take back their country.
Well, it seems that the Senegalese are really upset. They're still protesting.
Yes.
Do you fear, like some do, that this kind of behavior is contagious? We've seen what happened with the coups. Now this one seems like, you called it something earlier, I forgot what you said, but it seems like it's leading up to something that's quite nefarious, like a coup in and of itself. Do you fear that other West African nations might be looking at the way Macky Sall is going about manipulating the constitution and his people and might decide to join in as well?
Well, I've said it here before, even if not today, that the antidote to coup is good government. You understand what I'm saying? And conversely, coup is the only option for bad government. There's no other way, because if it's a coup against the people and the people cannot fight back, then they cry out to the only people that can fight back for them,
Okhai,
and that's the military.
To interrupt you,
No, it's fine.
but we have to.